Hi everyone, and welcome to today's lesson based on time drawing. Today we're going to look at how we apply our observational drawing skills as well as our shading and tone skills so that we can create quick sketches that capture the essence of the subject. This is a difficult task, especially when you're working with timings, and it will only work if you follow the instructions carefully. Pay attention to the timers and focus throughout the presentation, and you must watch the whole video as is set out in a logical order. By the end of the lesson, you should see some improvement in the drawings you're creating. For your preparation, there's a few things you'll need before we start. Drawing materials, you'll need a pencil, a HB or below. For the example, I used a 2B pencil, paper or a sketchbook, an eraser, and a sharpener. You'll need a suitable space to work in. Make sure you've got plenty of space to draw. You should use a clear table or hard surface with lots of room around you so that you can concentrate fully on your drawing. And you will need a clear view of this video. We will be drawing from photographs included in the video, so please make sure that you can see your screen clearly whilst you're drawing. On to today's task then. And today we're going to develop our observational drawing skills by creating 8 drawings completing within a specified time. On to the lesson objectives then. And lesson objective 1 is to develop our observational drawing skills, focusing on the most important elements first. The second learning objective, which will come towards the end, is to critically analyze and reflect upon our outcomes so that we can set targets for our future creations. And remember that to successfully achieve these objectives, you must think carefully about how you approach your drawing. Make sure that you pay close attention to the demonstration and the success criteria, as you'll be using this information at the end. Now we come on to the first task. And the first task is that I want you to look at this image, which is actually a painting, and you've got 1 minute to write down all the things that you can see. Think about what you can see in terms of the drawing or painting, and think of it as an artwork, not as a photograph. Can you see shading, tones, lines, etc.? You've got 1 minute to write down all the things you can see, starting now. Okay, so your time is up on that one. And now I'm going to point out some of the things that I saw. So I saw various shapes. I saw a blurred background, clean crisp lines, pattern, there were shadows and highlights in there, contrasting colours, the use of shape, line and texture. There was depth, so everything was clear in the foreground and a bit more blurry towards the back, and also perspective in some of the shapes. And the next part is I'm going to simplify this image a little more, and I want you to do the same thing. So this task, 1 minute again, and you need to write down all the different things that you can see in the image now. Now remember, I can point out the first thing that's not there anymore, and that is color. So you can now have 1 minute to write down what you see this time. Here are a few of the things that I thought of with this one. Again, much of these are the same, so there were various shapes still: blurred background, clean crisp lines, pattern, shadows, highlights, but this time there was a lot of contrast between the light and dark, and there was also the use of shape, line and texture, and still the depth and the perspective. I know, not too different from the first image. The next image takes this down a notch. So this one has been simplified even further. Again, same task, 1 minute, and there'll be one more after this. Write down all the things you can see now. Now you'll notice this looks very different from the first image that I showed you. You've got 1 minute starting now. This time, there's still the various shapes, but now I can start to see a bit more texture. There's a blurred background and the clean crisp lines, simple shapes and layers, because everything is starting to be simplified. I can actually see some pattern in there now in some of those suites. I can see shadows and highlights, the use of shape, line and texture, depth, perspective, and particularly in this one, some bright highlights and some blank space. Now I'm going to move on to the last image. This one very different from the first, and this one the most important one for today's lesson. And this one, as you can see, has been simplified a lot. Now you've got 1 minute, as same as before, and you need to write down all the things you notice about this one. And I think you'll find lots of the things you noticed before don't exist in this image. You've got 1 minute starting now. Okay, time's up on that one. And you'll see, even in my list, there's a lot less things I can notice. So there are still various shapes. There are simplistic outlines in this one. There's light and dark, there's depth, and there's layering. But they're very, very basic shapes. And you'll notice that now that it's been simplified, there isn't much there. And this should be the starting point for our observational drawing. You're probably thinking, well, why did I ask you to do all of this? Well, it's because you need to look for the simple things in an image. And even when you're looking at a color image, you can pick out these basic points. So mapping out the basic shapes, light and dark, are the first things that we should be drawing out when we create an observational drawing. Now to the main question, why time drawing? If you look at these examples, you can see they have varying times for each of the drawings, but they use the same subject. Now, the reason for this is time drawing actually makes you focus on what's in front of you. You will learn to observe objects more effectively and be able to translate this onto paper more quickly. It's a good way to practice your drawing skills, your basic skills, so that you're looking mainly at shape and how the objects interact with each other. And you'll see significant improvement when you've got more time to work. As you can see from the eye drawing here, in 2 seconds, that's not a lot of time to get much down, but the artist has used a basic outline and looked at the simplified image. In 2 minutes, they can add a bit more detail. They've started to add in the eyebrow and the eyelashes and a few highlights. And in 20 minutes, they can get a lot more done. And the same goes for the other images. I'm now going to tell you probably the most important thing for the time drawing, and that's called look twice and draw once. Now, looking twice and drawing once means that you spend twice as much time looking at your subject as you do drawing it. So for every minute that you spend drawing, you should be spending 2 minutes looking at the object. It can be easy to draw what you think you see and not actually pay attention to the subject matter. And when you do this, your drawing becomes distorted and less accurate. So you need to make sure that you're constantly looking at the object you're drawing and less on your paper. And it's a fine balance, because obviously if you're not looking at your paper, then you can't see what you're drawing. But you need to regularly look up at the object and check with your drawing to check the things are in the right place. A few hints and tips. The task for today, you're going to be drawing some Haribo sweets, and here's an example of mine. I've given myself 1 minute on the left hand side to draw from those sweets, and then on the right hand side 3 minutes, and as you can see there's more detail and more shading and tone. So a few tips before we move forward. You need to start with a basic light outline, and in a few minutes, in 1 minute, that's all you're going to have time to do. Try to overlap the shapes so that you create depth. Focus on the dark areas if you have time, and then create dark and light first. When you've got a little bit more time, the shadows are very important because they help this to be a realistic image. Try to add those shadows around the objects, and don't use an eraser. There isn't any time. So if you make a little mistake, just draw over the top and then carry on. It can be like a working drawing, so it doesn't matter if everything isn't perfect. Before we move on, I'm going to show you a real-time example. And this is using the image I showed you previously, so the selection of sweets that I had, and then showing you the difference between a 1 minute drawing and a 3 minute drawing. Please watch the whole video. It's a 1 minute and then 3 minute, but it will show you the difference. And it will show you that in the first drawing, in 1 minute, all I am focusing on is getting the outline correct. And then in the second drawing, which is the 3 minute drawing, I focus on the outline for the first minute, and that gives me 2 more minutes to add some shading and tone. Right, so now we come on to our task for today. And when we look at this, you're going to need to create 8 different drawings. The first 4 drawings will be based on one image, and the second 4 drawings on another image. And the time will get more as we go throughout. So we'll start off with a really basic 2-minute drawing, as you can see in the top left, and then we'll move to a 3, a 4, and a 5. But then we get the challenge because I'm going to change the image and we're going to flip the times around. So then the next one you'll get 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and then 1. Now if you look at the difference in this one, I was able to get much more detail as I had more time. But actually, by the time I got to the end, my 1-minute drawing at the end was as good as my 2-minute drawing at the beginning. So you can see that there was improvement because I was focusing more and I was starting to concentrate a lot more on the task. The success criteria from this, you can draw that from the video, you can draw it from all the other things I've talked about, but there are 3 main things I want you to look at. The first is accuracy, and that's this look twice and draw once. If at the end you can say, I have looked closely at the image I was drawing from and I've used simple lines to block in the major shapes and elements that I can see, and I have overlapped some lines to show the layered suite, then you'll have done well. For depth and tone, where possible, I've layered my pencil to create a range of tones from dark to light, making sure the shadows and the highlights are in the correct place. And the main thing for this one is improvement. As I had more time to draw, I was able to add more detail and build up the shading and tone to create an accurate study. My work has improved as I progressed. So by the end, the 1-minute drawing really should have a little bit more detail than when you started. So the first study here, I've taken a photograph of some Haribo sweets for you. If you don't want to use this image and you've got some sweets of your own, please feel free, and then you can use those, or you could use them after the lesson to have a little bit more practice. You've got 2 minutes to draw out what you can see, and your time starts now. I imagine that one was quite difficult for you. 2 minutes is not a lot of time to get the detail you'd be expecting. Now this time you'll get 3 minutes. So I would say that you need to get as much done in the 2 minutes as you did before, and that gives you 1 extra minute to add that extra detail. I'm not going to talk about it any longer. You've got 3 minutes starting now. Right, 3 minutes was a little bit easier. 4 minutes, you should be able to get a lot more. We won't hang around, we'll get through this. You've got 4 minutes starting now. Time's up on that one then. So now we're going to move on to the 5-minute study, and this is the most time you're going to get in this lesson. So I would expect to see a nice detailed outline and some shading and tone. Make sure you pay attention to the shadows beneath the sweets as well. Try to give it that 3D effect. After this one, we're going to change the image and it's going to get progressively harder. You've got 5 minutes starting now. Right, time to change it up a little bit now. You've had your most time. We're going to start going down. As you'll notice, I've changed the image this time. So there's a different composition for the suite. If you want to take a little break here, I know it's quite intensive. Take yourself a few minutes, get yourself relaxed, get ready to start. So you can pause the video now if you need to. If you're ready to start, then we've got 4 minutes on this one and your time starts now. Okay, 4 minutes. That was quite a nice one. Now 3 minutes, a little bit more difficult. Remember, outline, then the shading and tone. Hopefully you're getting used to the idea of looking at the subject now, and you should be able to get that outline down a little bit quicker. 3 minutes, time starts now. We're going to move on a little bit quicker now. You've got a 2-minute study. This is the one before the most difficult one. Your 2 minutes starts now. Right, so this is now the most difficult one of today, and this is the one you can compare with the first study that you did, the 2-minute study. You've got 1 minute. Focus on that outline first. Don't worry about mistakes, go over the top, make this a working drawing. This is definitely the most challenging one, but probably the most beneficial. You've got 1 minute to draw this image, and your time starts now. And that's your time up. And now we come back to our lesson objectives. So the first lesson objective, to develop our observational skills, focusing on the most important elements first, that you've already covered that, but that is something to take forwards in lesson objective 2. Now we're going to critically analyze and reflect our outcomes, and we're going to set some targets for our future creations. We need to analyze what we've created, reflect upon what we've learned. And to do that, we're going to write a small paragraph explaining what we've done, why we did it, what worked well, and how we can improve. And I'm going to give you some key points to help you with this on the next slide. Come back to the success criteria, the accuracy of being able to draw the outlines and focus on the basic shapes, the depth and tone of layering your pencil to create dark to light, shadows and highlights in the right place, and then the improvement as well as you progress through the time and as you had less time towards the end. You can come back to these to help you write that paragraph. Before you write it, I've got some key points. Firstly, think about what you've created. Don't forget to write down what you've drawn, why you've drawn it, and remember there's always a reason. Today we've drawn these to practice and to speed ourselves up a little and to focus on how we look at an object. How did you create it? Well, in this one you can talk about the different times and the range in difficulty as the time got less. If you had an outline, why did you use that? What techniques did you use to add shading and tone? What was successful? Well, it's always important for us to point out what you've done well, especially when you're developing or you're practicing. This should link with the technique. So if you managed to do the whole outline in 1 minute, have you managed to add shading and tone? And then finally, how can you improve? This is your target setting. Don't be too critical, but be honest. What areas were you least happy with, and how could you improve them in the future? Be specific. So in future, you could say, maybe I didn't have enough time to work on shading and tone. So my target would be to work on my outline a little bit more quickly, which would then give me more time to work on adding that dimension and that depth to the drawing. When you've done that paragraph, you can then start to submit your work. So you'll need to photograph all of your work and upload it to Teams, but don't forget to photograph your written work too. If you've got any issues with this, you can contact me through Teams or via email, but I hope you can all see the assignment, that you've all enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing your work.